Good afternoon. I'd like to call the subject matter hearing of the Senate Higher Education Committee to order, please. I'm Pat McGuire, Chairman of the committee, and you will hear the names of my colleagues as the roll is called. Jennifer?
Senator Rose, Senator Rezin, Senator McCann, Senator Fowler, Senator Rooney, Senator Stadelman, Senator Murphy, Senator Lightford, Senator Cullerton, Senator Castro, Senator Bennett, Senator Cunningham. Mr. Chairman.
Here. Thank you. The purpose of today's hearing, of course, is for we members of the committee to gain more information about DPI, Discovery Partners Institute, and I'm pleased that our lineup of witnesses includes the following. First, we will hear from Hans Ziegman, Director of the Governor's Office of Management and Budget. Then we will hear from the University of Illinois, specifically President Tim Killeen, Ed Seidel, Vice President of Economic Development and Innovation, and Dr. Bill Sanders, Interim Director of DPI. And then we will hear from Dr. Lisa Freeman, President, Northern Illinois University. Hans? And Hans, I want to thank you for the cooperation you've afforded us. So, as I mentioned to you, what I want to know is regarding this $500 million appropriation, where will the money come from? What's the timeline for drawing it down, and how will it be accessed?
Thank you, Senator McGuire. And for the record, my name is Hans Ziegman, and I am the Director of the Governor's Office of Management and Budget. And additionally, I just want to thank you for your outreach to me and for the collaboration that we've been able to have up to this point. It's been we've had some excellent conversations. The funding is set up in the statute, Article 138, Section 150 of Public Act 100-0586 reads as following. The sum of $500 million or so much thereof as may be necessary is appropriated from the Build Illinois Bond Fund to the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity for the development of the University of Illinois Discovery Partners Institute. As with most capital projects, it's expected that the $500 million will be drawn down over a number of years. And so typically the way this works is you go through a planning and design phase. Some portion of the appropriation is drawn down during that phase. In a project of this scale, that could be potentially a year or more. And then the remaining balance of the $500 million will be reappropriated in subsequent fiscal years until the project is completed. As the statute dictates, this will be paid out of Build Illinois bond funds. The current Build Illinois bond fund balance is $146.9 million. We have remaining authority to bond $634.8 million in Build Illinois bond funds. The funding mechanism to pay for those bonds is sales tax receipts. So that's the kind of the high level structure. I think it's important to note that the current timing for bond issuance we expect to be somewhere around late October for our next Build Illinois bond issuance. We anticipate $250 million bond issuance at that time. It will be a mix of taxable and tax-exempt bond proceeds, the precise values of which have not been yet determined. I'm happy to answer additional questions now.
Thank you. Any questions from members of the committee? Senator Cunningham.
So can you walk us through what sort of interaction will occur between the university and DCEO and any other entities in addition to the university and DCEO as the funding is appropriated?
Yeah, I think that, first of all, there's going to be a process of a basic grant writing process. And I think it might be helpful, Jennifer Butler, who is my deputy director over the Grant Accountability and Transparency Unit, may be able to give you a very good overview of how that grant process works, because I think that a lot of the there's a lot of benefits to the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act that are going to allow for the members to see very clearly what is happening during this process. And Jennifer, if you'd like to come up, maybe you could give the members of the committee an overview on GATA.
Jennifer, welcome. This is a nice surprise, and I appreciate your taking us through this process.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I am Jennifer Butler, the Deputy Director over the Grant Accountability and Transparency Unit. The grant accountability functions in Illinois are really based on the federal requirements. So Illinois has established a structure in place to ensure that we are complying with grant management protocols and laws at the federal level. So a key component of that grant-making process is ensuring that public funds are passed to entities who are known to be in a compliant status. For example, we do a background check, which is mandated at the federal level, to ensure that our entities are not barred and unable to receive public funding. So a centralized background check is performed. A risk assessment examines the risk profile or the strength of the internal controls of the organization. And we do that on a grantee by grantee basis so that we can look at the unique circumstances and any challenges that might exist for that grantee. If there are opportunities to tighten reporting, for example, to ensure more oversight, or to impose other parameters that help us manage that relationship and the administration of the public funds more judiciously, then we utilize that risk assessment and the risk profile to educate that relationship. We use templates that are compliant with federal requirements to ensure that we are articulating the terms and conditions of the grant agreement so that we have a clear scope of accountability and responsibility and what is to be carried out, along with a budget that sufficiently details what expenditures will be hitting and what can be done with the funds available. There is reporting that must take place during the term of the grant agreement that ensures DCEO is able to look at different performance intervals and deliverables, if you will, to ensure that the project or the program is proceeding as planned. And then at the end of the funding term, there is a closeout. So a reconciliation of expenses incurred and the distribution of funds, which may or may not have some type of a settlement at the very end. So these components are key and paramount to financially compliant grant management, and Illinois has adopted a compliant structure which uses centralized systems and standardization among reporting and various processes along the way to ensure that we are compliant and we are adhering to a decorum of transparency and accountability in our administration of those funds.
Okay, so mechanically, when the funds are drawn down, if you can talk to us about exactly how that's going to work. Is the university going to submit grants to DCEO, and DCEO is going to see that the grants are in compliance with the law and then release the funding? And you mentioned the word transparent numerous times. Can we be assured that that will be a transparent process, that the public will be able to see the application for the grants and see when and why those grants are approved?
The awarding of grants is a very transferable and open process. As your legislation, which established GATA, put into place, we have a catalog system called the Catalog of State Financial Assistance, which is mandated to record all awards passed through by our state agencies. So the catalog will document the distribution of awards from DCEO to the university. There will be a grant award that DCEO would maintain with the terms and conditions of that award. And then expenditures against that award are also transparent through the comptroller's office. So yes, it is highly transferable and transparent.
Senator Murphy and then Senator Bennett.
Thank you. And thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here today. I kind of want to continue on Senator Cunningham's questions. And who's going to determine the parameters of the grant? Who will actually write the specifics required for the grant and evaluate the grant? DECO will do that?
That's a function of the granting the agency, and that's DCEO, that's correct.
Okay, and so they will determine whether or not private and public universities are eligible to apply for this grant, or is the grant specific to one university?
So the way that the statute is written for the appropriation is made to DCEO for the development of the University of Illinois Discovery Partners Institute. Now, the Discovery Partners Institute itself may have a certain governance structure. It may have a means of distributing funds among the various universities and partners of that institute. And so that would take place within that organizational structure. But as far as the transfer of monies in accordance with what we passed in House Bill 109, it's from DCEO to the University of Illinois Discovery Partners Institute.
So it's technically not an open grant that people are eligible to apply for because of the way the statute's written.
Right. I think that's important to distinguish that this is a line item grant. It's not a lump sum. And I think that, and as you go through the capital bill, there's two different kinds of grants, right? You have and just within Article 138, which is where this resides, there's a number of other grants that are more like lump sum grants, like say for brownfield redevelopment or for municipalities or for various things, urban weatherization, where you could have a number of different entities that could potentially apply for those grants. I mean, this is granted to a specific entity.
And then will they be required to follow all the procurement procedures that are currently in statute that we've often heard issues with universities complying with our procurement procedures?
I think that's a procurement questions for the university. I'm going to defer to
Okay,
the university
great.
on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Please add Senator Rose to the roll. Senator Bennett?
Thank you. Director, I just have, as you were kind of giving kind of the overview, first of all, welcome. You mentioned how the current balance of Build Illinois funds that are available was 100 and how much?
$146.9 million.
Okay. So that's currently available in those funds
That's
today?
right. In the
Okay.
Build Illinois Bond Fund right now, that's how much money is there.
All right. But just to be clear, that's not what you say, that's not what's available just for DPI, that's for, are there other commitments?
Oh, sure. There are
Bill?
lots of other commitments from the Build Illinois Bond Fund. And Article 138 and I think 139 also within the budget have a list of items that are in there. A couple of examples, the Cairo Port Authority, we talked about the brownfield
Right.
redevelopment. I mean, all of those various line items also draw on Build Illinois bond funds. I think what's important too to recognize is that say there's a $500 million appropriation for the Discovery Partners Institute. That doesn't mean that $500 million will flow out of the Build Illinois Bond Fund in fiscal year 19. Only that fractional share that's used for the planning and development phase and those things that are happening within fiscal year 19, and then the balance would be reappropriated in future fiscal years. So one of the things that we're working with the university on right now is they're developing a budget for DPI, and then we can look at that and see how it's going to compete with the other uses of those funds. Typically, just as kind of a mental benchmark, a lot of these projects spend at maybe 10 or 20% of the appropriation level in the first year. I mean, I think that the Capital Development Board we could probably give a bit more information on sort of rules of thumb with these capital projects, but in my mind, those are kind of figures that I use as I'm thinking about this. So the remainder would be spending out in future years. So if we have, $146.9 million, we're doing a $250 million bond issuance. There are lots of other projects, obviously, that we're going to be able to fund. In many of the projects, I think there's about $1 billion, I could be wrong about that number, I'm doing mental math here, that is appropriated out of the Build Illinois Bond Fund in this budget, but we wouldn't actually ever spend out $1 billion within fiscal year 19 because of the multi-year nature of the projects.
Well, with that in mind, with the 146 currently available and the 250 or so that you think will be available by the end of October, are we on track here? I mean, from the 500 million, is it conceivable that 10 or 20% could be released? So at least that process, the planning stage, in this fiscal year?
That's the idea, is to once we have the budget and, the grant agreement is established and all of the hoops have been cleared that Jennifer so artfully articulated, and we can actually start to release the money. It is the hope that we can start working through not only the planning and development phases, but I think there's some other things that the university wants to do in addition to, things like vertical construction, for example. I think that there are other ideas as well with respect to using existing facilities or other things. So, but I'll let the university comment on their vision for the DPI. I don't have those details at this point.
Okay. Thank you, Director.
Hans, in the same line of inquiry, you are assiduous in visiting state facilities and noting their deferred maintenance needs. And a particular interest to this committee and this audience, I would think, is the fact that there are $3 billion in deferred maintenance needs at our public universities. How will the DPIs draw on the Build Illinois funds, which you've just described, coexist with meeting those other needs?
That's a great question. One of the upside of having this appropriated out of Build Illinois bond funds is it will not compete with the Capital Development Fund, which is funded through general obligation bonds, and that's where the money is going to come from to do a lot of the deferred maintenance. And as we've discussed in the past, I mean, that is a huge priority for us to take a look at this deferred maintenance, not just at the universities, but as you know, I've been out visiting prisons and human service facilities throughout the state, and trying to get a handle on all of these deferred maintenance needs, and we're actively prioritizing these things. We've worked with both the Board of Higher Education, Capital Development Board, and ICCB to get lists from them on their highest priority deferred maintenance projects. Right now, we have 18 projects that total about $57 million that we're getting ready to move on across a variety of the universities throughout the state. I have that list with me that I can share it with the members of this committee. In addition to that, there are 43 more extremely important projects that total an additional $81 million that we intend to move on very quickly. We're working with CDB and the Higher Ed Board to prioritize those. The list from the Community College Board is about $71.3 million in emergency deferred maintenance projects. And so all of that is very, very high on our list. There are some complexities in these, and just to highlight one complexity, for example, one of the top 18 projects is for $3 million of deferred maintenance, an emergency need really, at the visual arts buildings at Illinois State University. There's also a separate $61 million appropriation for renovation of that building, of the same visual arts building at Illinois State University. And so, dealing with the deferred maintenance needs and doing the planning and design that's necessary for the renovations so that we can move all of these things forward, it has to be coordinated, right? So, if you have a building that's occupied that has critical deferred maintenance needs, we want to address those things. But we're not going to, I don't think, responsibly ignore those sorts of things while we do planning and design on more thorough renovation of the property. So we're trying to think through all of those things as well.
So tell me again, you said that the Build Illinois funds for DPI will not compete with the deferred maintenance?
Right, because they're funded from different sources.
Okay, and deferred maintenance is funded from?
The Capital Development Fund.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about some infrastructure improvements that Related Midwest has broached for the proposed site for DPI. The extension of 3 streets, which I would assume the cost of that would be borne by the city of Chicago and perhaps by the developer. But also moving the metro tracks west of where they are now, which is hard by Clark Street, and also adding a stop on the CTA Red Line. So regarding moving the metro tracks and adding a stop on the Red Line, could either of those projects lay claim to state funds?
I would have to, I'm not aware of a specific line item in the current budget that appropriates either one of those. There are perhaps lump sums that would be appropriate to access. I'm not sure offhand. I don't know that I can give you a clear answer.
No, I can do a better job asking the question.
Yeah.
I didn't mean, is there an appropriation in the
Yeah.
current budget, although I'm glad you addressed that, but
Yeah.
are projects of that type eligible for state funding in whole or in part? Moving metro tracks and building a CTA stop?
I mean, in theory, they could be. There could be an appropriation written for that. Just as an example, within the current capital budget that was passed, there's funding for metro stations. There are funding for CTA stations within the current budget. So there is precedent for doing that.
Okay, thank you. Senator Rose, any questions?
I think the chairman picked up on something here about the deferred maintenance issue. Explain again why you say those don't conflict. And no offense, Hans, maybe speaking in the microphone.
Sure.
Thanks.
Is that a little bit more
That's a lot
clear
better.
for you,
Yeah.
Senator Rose? Thank you. Sure. So they come from different funding sources. So the deferred maintenance needs are primarily paid out of the Capital Development Fund, whereas the Discovery Partners Institute is paid out of the Build Illinois Bond Fund. One is general obligation bonds. The other is Build Illinois Bond Fund, Build Illinois bonds. So they're separate funding sources. Now, that's not to say that the Discovery Partners Institute won't compete with other capital needs. There are numerous other capital needs that are paid out of the Build Illinois Bond Fund.
And
But
what's the BIB's
Yeah.
source? Is it a GO as well?
it's sales tax.
And it renews every year or not? I mean, as you pay off, do you get new opportunity every year at that, or is it just 130 is all that's left?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I mean, there is, right now, we have $634 million of bonding authority. And so that is remaining on more than $6 billion of total authorized Build Illinois bond funds. We have currently outstanding, the total issued bonds is about $5.6 billion, of which we have about $2.3 billion in outstanding obligations. And so those are, long-term debt instruments that the state issues.
Yeah, but
for
this
these
has been a
projects.
long-term debt. I mean, the Build Illinois goes way back. So shouldn't some of that be amortized off by now? I guess my question is, as that debt amortizes out, does that free up additional funds to spend, or is that just completely, does that terminate at that point? The
No,
authorization terminates?
we would need, we would need additional authority to issue bonds in excess of $634 million.
I actually, to get to the chairman's point, I'm not sure it's entirely accurate to say that this doesn't have any impact on deferred maintenance. I mean, it's a choice that was made. I mean, we could have choose to pay deferred maintenance out of Build Illinois bonds too.
I'm not sure I understand the question. Is there a question? Because the way that we do capital spending at universities typically is out of the capital development fund.
I get that, typically.
Yeah.
But I mean, at some level, this all becomes sort of a fungible zero-sum game here. I mean, at some point in time, we could have just said, hey, we're going to do some capital renewal out of the Build Illinois Bond Fund, too.
Sure. There is ability to bond for education out of the Build Illinois Bond Fund specifically.
Yeah.
Okay. That is one of the 4 categories.
I guess that's one question I'm going to have eventually here is, this request has come forward ostensibly from the university, and to what extent do they have other things on their capital needs list that could have been in place of this? That's really probably more of a question, better place for them, but I wanted to set the stage for that by essentially getting you to agree that Build Illinois bonds could have been used for other capital needs, and I think you're...
Well, yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Hans, Jennifer, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm tardy in giving permission to James Carter of BlueRoomStream.com to videotape this hearing. Next, from our flagship land-grant state university, welcome. Please introduce yourselves and proceed. Would you?
Got it. Tim Killeen, President of the University of Illinois System.
Thank you.
And I'm Bill Sanders. I'm the Interim Director of the Discovery Partners Institute.
And I'm Ed Seidel, Vice President for Economic Development and Innovation, University of Illinois.
Welcome. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Senator. I'd like to point out that the Chairman of the Board of Trustees of the University of Illinois System is in the audience. That's Chairman Tim Kortz, and also former Chair and current Trustee Ed McMillan is in the audience too. I'll just point them out as participating. Thank you all, Senators, for the opportunity to be with you today and to share our vision for the Discovery Partners Institute and the Illinois Innovation Network. Earlier today, actually, Chancellor Cook and I were just down the street to announce Springfield as the first downstate hub of the Illinois Innovation Network, a virtually connected network of researchers and students across the state. So yes, we talk a lot about the location in Chicago, but the vision here includes manifold developments downstate as well, and we made the first announcement just this morning. So I just wanted to set the stage and then turn to my colleague Ed Seidel here to get into more of the specifics. To set the stage, as I say, and share the genesis of these initiatives and why we feel they're so important to the state. You may be familiar with the University of Illinois System's strategic framework, which is a roadmap we charted 3 years ago to guide our future. We're following that roadmap, and in that it had a set of bedrock principles that call on us to reimagine student-focused teaching and learning, to stretch for research and scholarship with global impact, to marshal our resources to lift the physical and economic health of the region, and to invent our own future, that is to create the university of tomorrow by being very modern. So DPI and IIN check all the boxes of our strategic framework. So these developments, exciting as they are actually in our strategic plan, and they check the box. They will educate thousands of students, Illinois natives and others, in leading-edge, hands-on curricula that will nurture the innovators and entrepreneurs of tomorrow. These forward-looking programs will help us keep our best and brightest students here at home, upstate and downstate, rural and urban, and help stem a recent out-migration that has seen more top students leave the state for college and then stay in other states after they graduate. And I know that's very much on all of our minds in this room. These initiatives will help with that. They'll add a jolt to our already rich legacy of pioneering research discovery that truly packs a punch. And I won't go through the long list of companies that have come out, and you've heard it many times, but we are known for transformative breakthroughs in innovation strategies that drive economic development by creating new products, businesses, and jobs for tomorrow. And we think that this effort, rooted as it is in our strategic initiative and in the land-grant mission, will serve the common good through providing opportunities for generations of students, but also improving healthcare and outcomes, protecting our environment, providing for a growing population, improving our food and agriculture industries, and many manifold companies and activities that you'll hear more about. They will deeply integrate research, education, and innovation in a modern way. That's providing hands-on experiential experiences for our students, which has been seen to be the largest driver of economic growth and progress. And so we're proud of the developments here. We haven't received a dollar yet from the state appropriation, but we're extremely grateful for the bipartisan votes emanating from, and all of your votes as well, that have led to this $500 million capital appropriation for DPI and IIN. And we've been working furiously to develop the grant application that you've heard about just now to DCEO, which will have more specifics. And when this was announced in October, we said we'd take the first year to really design and develop that strategic roadmap, and we're well along. And I think the announcement this morning in Springfield is a testament to that. We have further announcements this week. There'll be one tomorrow in Urbana-Champaign of the initial emphasis themes in the hub that will be in Urbana-Champaign. There'll be one the day after for UIC, and then we're delighted that President Lisa Freeman is joining us because we're very moving quickly to other announcements. So to tell you more and to help respond to the questions, I brought the team here. And Ed Seidel has been our leader, whose vision and passion has been palpable in creating this new statewide innovation network. And with your indulgence, I'd like to turn to him to provide a little bit more of the status quo and where we are with the planning and implementation aspects. Thank you.
Thanks, President Killeen. Thanks, Senators, for inviting us to be here today. We are really excited about the DPI and the IIN, and I've been working on this for 2 years very hard, and there's a large team of us now and a growing team, and now with Bill joining the team, you'll be seeing a lot more of the results of our planning. As President Killeen noted, DPI will deeply integrate research, innovation, and education across many different disciplines, and that's one of the key aspects of the DPI. We try to do this within our universities, but we wanted to create a special venue where universities and companies and organizations from across the state would be able to work very closely together in areas that are important to the state, such as food and agriculture, health and wellness, computing and data, and environment and water. These are 4 of the initial themes that we've developed, and we have working groups that are starting in on exactly what those activities will be. But in fact, running through all 4 of these are activities that impact culture and society. How do these really impact the state? Entrepreneurship and technology commercialization. How do we accelerate the development of new companies and new wealth? What do we do about education and workforce development, not only at the education of the university students, but throughout the entire state at all levels of education? And then what public policy is needed to ensure that good decisions are made as we go forward for innovation? The DPI will be the central hub of the Illinois Innovation Network. that virtually connects researchers and students from across Illinois, and we have in mind many ways that they will be connected, both with transportation and with virtual linked classrooms. And we're working hard to develop out the plans for that now. We will engage university and industry companies to work side by side with our researchers and students to develop new technologies where they can integrate into the marketplace to benefit society and spur economic growth across the state. The DPI in Chicago is the centerpiece, but every hub will be vitally important in developing this out. We have hubs across the entire state, and each hub will focus on its unique strengths that are associated with the universities in the hub, while reaching out across disciplines to answer the tough questions of the day, looking at grand challenges for both industry and society. We today, as you've heard, announced our Springfield hub this morning, with great fanfare and great excitement, and we will share initial project plans for our campuses in Chicago and in Urbana in the next couple of days. In just a few minutes, you'll hear from Northern Illinois University President Lisa Freeman about her university's involvement in the IIN and how NIU will be able to anchor a hub that will benefit DeKalb and the Northern Illinois region. All of the hubs will work together to address societal questions like how do we feed the world despite shrinking farmland and the need to protect environmental resources? How do we cure cancer and deliver those innovative treatments to people regardless of income or other barriers? How do we increase cybersecurity and reduce the impact of attacks on our systems and our institutions? These are the kinds of questions that we'll be looking at DPI and across the network and with our international partners as well. To share a little bit more about how the DPI and the IIN will operate, I'm going to turn it over to Interim Director Bill Sanders.
Well, thank you, Ed. Thank you, Chairperson McGuire, and thank you, Senators, for having us here today. I truly am the newest member of the team. I became the interim director of DPI on August 16 of this year, and in fact, it was just announced last Friday. So indulge me, but I've been getting up to speed very quickly, and I'd like to tell you a few more details about what's going on with DPI. President Killeen and Vice President Seidel have shared with you a vision for DPI and the Illinois Innovation Network and the big picture of the challenges that they'll attack. I'd now like to tell you a little about our progress so far and how it's going to support those exciting projects. DPI will attack these grand challenges for the 21st century on a scale and in a way we've never seen before. The current faculty at our 3 system universities will be the foundation for DPI, and we're going to leverage their experience to get DPI up and running. Starting this fall, we will institute an aggressive hiring program that has incentives to our system universities to further populate DPI. Once fully operational, DPI will serve on the order of 10,000 students every 5 years. We anticipate having our first official cohort of students in residence at the DPI by the fall of 2019. And we just opened a DPI office on 2000 South Wacker Drive in Chicago, giving us a classroom, some meeting space, and some office space to get us going on this right now. We plan to build a facility in Chicago's South Loop by 2021 and have that be fully operational by 2023. We continue to have productive discussions with the real estate developer Related Midwest about facility plans for DPI in Chicago. As Ed alluded, DPI will be connected to the other hubs in the IAN through a high-tech collaborative environment that we're currently designing. It will feature classrooms outfitted with the latest in visualization and display technologies that will eliminate the physical distance barriers that we have today. This will allow faculty and students to participate in multi-located courses, researchers to share discoveries with one another and innovation more quickly, and will be a test bed itself for platform designers to improve collaboration by distance. The majority of the $500 million state appropriation will be used to construct the DPI facility in Chicago and to build and renovate facilities at each of the hubs and to build that collaborative infrastructure and have it reach each hub. We've engaged many of the state universities about becoming hubs in the IAN, And we hope to have some news on, to share on future hubs in addition to the 3 announcements that you've heard about that are coming this week, this fall. We continue to reach out to additional institutions across the state as we build out the network. We already are starting classes at the DPI. We've launched an academic and entrepreneurship programming with a DPI-affiliated entrepreneurship and venturing course that began in Chicago this summer with students from across the U of I system. We also hosted a program in July that connected entrepreneurs from Israel's Tel Aviv University with entrepreneurs and innovators in Chicago. Tel Aviv University is a worldwide leader in entrepreneurship and DPI's first international partner. In addition to Tel Aviv University, we've had productive discussions with other universities in Israel, Jordan, Mexico, Germany, Ireland, and China. We hope to announce additional international partners in the coming week. Now I'd like to introduce Professor Lisa Freeman, president of the Northern Illinois University, to share her experience in designing a downstate hub for the IIN.
Thank you, Bill, and thank you, Senators, for inviting us to be here today. I have with me in the audience Northern Illinois University's Vice President for Research and Innovation Partnerships, Jerry Blasey, and the City of DeKalb's Economic Development Planner, Jason Michnick. Over the past year, our Northern Illinois University leadership team has engaged with officials from the University of Illinois system about forming a hub in the DeKalb area. We envision a hub that will leverage the excellence of our faculty and staff, our proximity to Chicago, and our location in one of the most productive agricultural regions in the U.S. and in the world, while also allowing us to enhance and strengthen relationships with the U of I system and the Urbana-Champaign campus's College of Agriculture, Consumer, and Environmental Sciences. Our hub will focus on 2 of the DPI emphases, food and agriculture and environment and water, areas where we can provide immense benefit to the Northern Illinois economy. We expect to announce our plans for the hub in the coming weeks in partnership with the U of I system and with the City of DeKalb.
Thank you. Gentlemen and lady, I barely know the front end of a horse from the back end, but I've got to say, whoa. You've told us you've been working on this for 2 years. This is the first, to my best recollection, I've heard anything more from the University of Illinois other than the initials DPI. I have questions, my constituents have questions, stakeholders throughout higher education in the state of Illinois have questions. So if we could, I'd like to start at the ground level. On what is DPI modeled?
On what is DPI a model? Is that the question, sir?
Yes.
There are models of innovation in urban settings and in states that we've looked at, and we've looked internationally as well. There's Finland, there's Germany, there's the UK, there's Chinese institutes, there's Russian institutes that my colleague Ed Seidel has. Singapore is a particularly interesting model because in the last 30 years, Singapore has had intensive urban economic development by combining university resources with private companies, small, medium, and large, and it's really raised the whole nation state to an entirely different level. So there are models internationally, there are models statewide, there are also, of course, Silicon Valley as a model, Research Triangle Park as a model. There are successful models of economic development that are built around research universities. This is a little different. This is a more modern version of that. We think it's a more modern version of that, but certainly there are lessons learned from all of those models, and maybe Ed Seidel would like to elaborate a little bit on that.
Could you pull the mic closer, sir?
One more very concrete example, Cornell Tech in New York City is one that's a partnership between Cornell University and the Technion in Israel. And Mayor Bloomberg kicked that off, in fact, had a international competition to say who will build a research and innovation district on Roosevelt Island, and put up $100 million to sort of seed the beginnings of that. And we visited that, and we, in fact, both partners, Technion and Cornell, quite deeply to understand how they operate.
Since you mentioned it, do you know what state funding is of Cornell Tech? What amount?
It's largely private money. We've actually looked at their business model. It validated many of our early assumptions about what we might try to do here. Cornell, in fact, is raising $1 billion for faculty endowments for the faculty there to operate. Technion pays for its own way, and in fact, we just visited there about a month ago. They have 4 buildings on the site, and each single building has a different business model and how it's funded. So it's complicated, but they have similar goals, but ours is more comprehensive.
All right, and since you brought this up, what is the status of private fundraising for DPI? How much is in your pockets right now?
In our pockets, I'd rather talk about how much we have potential for. We have many, many conversations with potential donors, and we're talking about funding potentially in many hundreds of millions of dollars, and we think that's quite viable for us to be able to achieve as we go forward on this.
So no figure in hand?
Well, I can say that we have, for DPI specifically, we're not ready to announce a number that we have in hand, but we have raised $1.6 billion in our fundraising campaign for the University of Illinois system over the last several years. We have that goal of $3.1 billion that we're well on track to. So we have a professional fundraising, philanthropic expertise that we're going to be deploying in many ways, and we're very excited about the potential for DPI. It's a little early to be making those announcements, and obviously the key donors want to participate in those kinds of announcements, but we're looking at a very significant philanthropy.
The governor said that there are billions in private donations on their way, and that he expects groundbreaking within 6 months. Do you expect to break? I think he made that statement in June. Do you expect to break ground before the end of the calendar year?
Well, we expect to be able to announce a groundbreaking timetable in a matter of weeks to months. We're very close to that. We're working intensively through all the procurement issues and every hoop that we need to get any donations of land papered up so that we can actually have a announcement. We're not going to plan premature announcements but we certainly think we're close to a groundbreaking timetable. That'll be the first, and then we'll know. Now, our plans include, as you just heard, full elaboration of the Chicago node, the DPI itself, under Bill Sanders' leadership by 2023, with groundbreaking we imagine to be in 2021. But those aren't the specific dates that you may be looking for right now. But we're close to having that fleshed out.
Okay, I have a question about the ground you wish to break. Yeah. How was the 78 chosen to be the site for DPI?
We looked at a number of potential sites in Chicagoland, let's put it that way, and the program evolved to the point that Related Midwest came to us with a donation proposal, verbal, that we got very excited about, because it's that particular location is on the riverfront, it's downtown Chicago, it's doesn't displace any communities, it's large, and there was a natural affinity, I think everybody could appreciate, between the developer's interest in building a whole new modern district and the excitement of having young people and innovation at the heart of it all. And that's also a model that's been seen in other places as well. The riverfront in Copenhagen's a model, for example, of that, etc. So it was a coming together of, I would say, parallel visions that seemed to really, in an effective way, come together. So that really then, and the donation, or the proposed donation of the land, was very obviously significant.
Yes, proposed donation. Yeah. How many acres?
Well, we are talking with the developer about how many acres. There have been various numbers put out. In the original announcement, there was talk of 20 acres. We would like the number to be a large number. There are other requirements and other potential inhabitants of that particular area, including a corporate, residential, etc. So that number is not finalized yet either, and I apologize up front, you're going to hear a lot when I don't quite have the specifics laid out, but remember that the appropriation was made in May. We're working through the procurement and the complexity of the state funding apparatus. At the same time, we're talking with corporate partners, international partners, and donors. And so there's a lot going on here, and I imagine there will be additional opportunities to have hearings like this where we can provide much more specifics. But we're going to tell you what we can at this stage, and it's pretty exciting news.
What written agreements exist between DPI and Related Midwest?
There is no papered written agreement today, but there is a draft that we have been iterating on.
Imagine the Chicago Planning Commission doesn't give approval to Related Midwest to develop the site. Where will you go?
Well, in that eventuality, we would rethink our whole approach, but I personally doubt that that's the situation. We have personal assurances from Mayor Emanuel and others in the city governance of expediting approvals. So,
you mentioned partners, and in the materials you gave to us, Northwestern University and the University of Chicago are listed as partners. Are they contributing money to this enterprise?
They will be contributing in kind. They have their own hubs that will be connected to this, and those discussions are ongoing. We don't expect universities to be sort of donors to the DPI, but they will have permanent physical presences that will be funded by, and that's our arrangement with the international partners too. So they will self-fund their physical presence in this system.
At a site erected with public dollars?
Yes.
So that they will pay their way, and in fact, there are different models. They could potentially build their own building. I've had conversations with some of our Israeli partners about doing fundraising jointly with them to raise funding for them, or they could lease buildings that would be built there as well.
Okay. Excuse me. Oh, excuse me. Governor Rauner has been quoted as referring to the $500 million appropriation, as a, quote, down payment. Are subsequent payments anticipated?
We're not currently assuming subsequent state funding contributions like this bolus, I would say. But our econometric studies, we've got 2 independent econometric studies underway that will probably be ready for release in a month or 2. I expect about 2 months. The numbers of the economic impact of this initiative are huge, and I could just point out that the effect of MIT on the Boston economy is by some estimated to be in the hundreds of billions, if not trillions of dollars. So we have the sense that this is catalytic funding that will really lead to economic development that will be very self-propelling into the future. So we're not working on that assumption.
But again, down payment. Will there be subsequent payments? Do you anticipate seeking subsequent payments from the state of Illinois for DPI?
Obviously we are a university with deferred maintenance. We have our regular state budget that we will be coming forward every year, and we have a whole legislative package that speaks to the funding for public higher education that we're delighted that Northern Illinois University has joined in. So we will be we will be proposing funding of the University of Illinois system into the future, but for capital, specifically for DPI, there are no plans to do that right now. But we're very excited with what this unleashes, this particular appropriation. Again, we're so grateful for the bipartisan support for this and the speed with which it's come forward. And I think Governor Rauner is right when he's saying that, implying that this is the first of something that could really grow expansively into the future. And down payment, yes, with the philanthropic support, the corporate support, we expect this number to be not dwarfed, but it'll be a major contribution, a catalytic contribution, which is obviously getting us started, but there will be other major sources of revenue for this.
So is that to say that we can expect a request for an annual appropriation to DPI per se?
I would not eliminate that from potential consideration, mostly because the operating characteristics of this, we are going to be recruiting more professors, and they will be part of the U of I system. We are growing enrollments, but we see this as a natural part of the overall University of Illinois system. But we're not planning on requesting a line item for the DPI into the future currently.
Thank you. Questions from other members of the committee? Senator Bennett.
So many questions. And many we've expressed privately, so we don't need to go over the same terrain. But I guess if we could just kind of start here, and I guess perhaps the first question can be to you, Dr. Sanders. Your previous position was the department head of electrical and computer engineering. Is that correct?
That's correct,
So,
yes.
in your experience, explain to me how this works. You know, U of I in particular, and your college in particular of that subset, has been responsible for some of the innovations that have completely changed the world, right?
Right.
And so how does it work now if you have a professor that comes to campus and they come up with something that's never been done before, and there's a patent, I assume. Who controls the patent? Who takes credit for these discoveries currently?
Sure, I'd be happy to explain that to you. As you said, we're very proud at the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering, the College of Engineering, and in fact the whole system of the innovations that have come out really over the last 100 years. The way ownership of intellectual property occurs within the university would be exactly the same in DPI. Right now, when work is done that is funded by outside sources through the university, it's the ownership of that and the license of that is governed by whatever the agreement is, of course subject to state law, with the funder of that research. Typically, and I'd have to say most commonly, the ownerships are owned by the university, and then subsequently may be licensed to others to create further innovation. I can say personally, I've had a patent that was granted, owned by the university, and then licensed to an outside company then to continue the innovation. But this is a very typical way of doing business. This ensures that those innovations through, in fact, an Office of Technology Management that's managed by Ed's office ensures that those discoveries are used in the best possible way.
See, I had a feeling you'd be the person to ask with your background in this. But I guess my question is, I mean, obviously we're very proud of, in the whole system of what we're able to accomplish and what we consider the best research in the world. And so I don't know how that will work, or can you explain how that would work when you're now pairing up with Northwestern, U of Chicago,
Sure.
who also have a pretty good legacy themselves, Tel Aviv University, universities all over the world. Explain to me how this isn't just we're going to take things which could be owned by, to the material benefit of our state university, but also to help with the prestige and the rankings of our university, and now kind of
No, that's a great question.
dispelling it to other universities.
So the first thing I should note is that the College of Engineering, and in fact the whole University of Illinois system, is built on taking a leadership role in interdisciplinary research that involves many partners. Now, those could be partners across the university or across the university system, and those could be partners outside the university. Currently, even in the current system, many of our grants and contracts are joint with other universities, are joint with other companies.
Okay.
By taking a leadership role in something like DPI and IIN, we ensure that the University of Illinois system and the state of Illinois gets credit for those discoveries. Obviously, agreements will be made when partners come to DPI in which the ownership of those discoveries will be shared in the appropriate ways. And that's no different, really, than the agreements that we have today when we partner. I currently have research projects going on that are joint with other universities, and we currently have agreements today about how that intellectual property is shared. And we believe that we will model how DPI works on the way we do things today. I think the really innovative thing about DPI, and what's so exciting about DPI, is it's going to provide a marketplace in which many different universities, the very best researchers from the very best universities in the world, will come together, and through that collaboration, that facilitation of that collaboration, we'll have even more discoveries and more exciting discoveries than we could do if we worked alone. So the fact that DPI will encourage broader collaboration, but do so according to the rules of the games that are long established at the university, will really give the state of Illinois, the University of Illinois system, in fact, all the state universities, an edge in that collaboration. Does that help you?
It does, and I like your vision. We'll have to see how everybody plays well.
Thank you.
One thing that I hear a lot, and of course my district that I represent includes the Urbana-Champaign campus, I hear the term UI labs thrown out a lot. And I don't know, I think it largely, I'm trying to think of timelines for when you, obviously you've been here since '94, so you've been here a long time, but for the others at the table, and I'm sorry you got thrown into this, so sorry about that. I hope that's a comfortable chair. But tell me how this isn't going to be another UI labs, where that wasn't also billed as a private-public partnership, and was rolled out the same way, and people felt really good about it. And my understanding is the university has almost no role in it now. So talk to me about that, whoever wants to, Ed, if you'd like to. And
Why don't you go ahead, Ed, because I'm not as
I'm happy
familiar.
to jump in here.
Thank you.
And also I could add to what Bill was saying earlier about multi-university partnerships being a major competitive advantage for the state to be able to bring those in. But on UI Labs, which is something operating in that way, the major differences are that the University of Illinois will stay in the leadership role for the DPI. There were similarities in terms of the initial vision, and in this case, we've learned some lessons from that. So we are going to stay in the leadership role. We have in mind a board that would manage the Discovery Partners Institute, or that would oversee it. That would be led by the president of the University of Illinois. And then we have the idea that we will very deeply integrate student, faculty, and corporate development at the same time on the same site. UI Labs is more of a spot where companies come and then they work. There are contracts that people have for certain kinds of research that is done, and that can be successful or not, but in this case, we have a different model in mind, and we will stay at the helm of this. And I think those are the two key things that will differentiate the initial trajectories of these.
Maybe I could add a third one, Senator, please. UI Labs has been successful, and there is participation by the University of Illinois still, and it's been very successful in gaining access to federal grants. The scale is entirely different. This is a much larger scale initiative that we're talking about in DPI-IIN. We're talking about hundreds of faculty, new faculty being brought in. We're talking about tens of thousands, as you heard, of students. We're talking about many corporations, companies, and a placement in downtown Chicago and connection across the whole state. It's a much bigger. So I think there are lessons learned from UI Labs, and the UI Lab leadership has told me personally that they want to be a hub, and of course they will be a hub, and they'll be a great hub for this innovation network that we're looking at.
Well, there's no dispute for me that the scale is much larger. I guess that's my concern, is the way that turned out on a smaller scale. This is bigger. I just wanted those reassurances that if we're going in, that we're going to have control throughout in terms of the state and the state university. In full disclosure, Ed Seidel is my next door neighbor, and I can tell you, I know how hard you work, because I see you, and this is no exaggeration, the most in this room that I do at all. I think 90% of our interactions have been like this, as opposed to over my fence. And that suggests, because you travel a lot. And I know, you work a lot with, fly all over the world and all over to work with universities and other groups to try to bring them in. With the knowledge that you've been doing that for a long time, when are we going to be at the point where we can go from, I can't tell you yet, we're really, really close, there's big partners involved, when are we going to get at that point? Because here's my concern, Ed, is that when the governor and the University of Illinois last October came, we talked about it being a true public-private partnership. That has disappeared from this bill. There's not a matching element now. It is just $500 million, and I know that's not exactly correct because we've talked about the rollout part of that. But when can you give us an idea? And I'm not asking for a deadline I'm going to hold you to exactly, but are we talking weeks, months, years? When are we going to be able to talk about the private part of this partnership?
So I'm going to answer that, and I think maybe Tim and Bill might want to add in. But so since we share a garden together, I have a gardening metaphor for this, which I learned growing an ivy patch. Not the poison ivy one we have, but I planted ivy some years ago in a house on McKinley Avenue in Champaign. And the metaphor is, first it sleeps, then it creeps, then it leaps. And that's where we are. We're passing from creeping into leaping, and I tell you, you're going to see lots of announcements, and now we're completely in the open. Initially, we were more in a sort of a quiet mode, developing things. We didn't want to have premature discussions or quiet discussions being made public prematurely, for example, with some of our international partners. And so those are developing very well, and there will be a lot more that in rapid succession, I think, in the coming months, there will be a lot of things that are ready for discussion, including partnerships with companies. The $500 million appropriation has completely changed the character of the conversations with some companies. I've had conversation with some very major technology companies that we would love to have in the state here, and we talked about the DPI last year, and they're like, well, Ed, that's really interesting. And then we come back and we say, and now we have $500 million, and they're like, we are sure the CEO wants to talk with you now about potential partnerships. And those things are developing now very rapidly, also with potential donors. And so these things are happening, and so we'll be having more announcements. International partnerships. We have just reached agreement on 2 university international partnerships that will likely bring the presidents of the universities to Illinois from international destinations, and potentially more because those conversations are heating up. So there will be a sort of a cadence of announcements of things that are happening that I think is going to make everyone feel like, wow, this is really not only about to happen, but it's very exciting. We have timelines now for the classes, as Bill said. We at 200 South Wacker Drive at the DPI, we have a set of classes that are being designed, as well as some classes that are being carried out now. By next fall, the first cohort of students will be there in residence, and we'll be building up towards what we hope will be an opening at the site at the 78 within 3 years. And so we think that that's a viable, so when ground breaks for that, I can't say for sure, but that's the goal, and we think it's very realistic that we can have an institute operating there within 3 years on the new site, so, and et cetera, many other things.
So Senator, if I could just...
Yes, Mr. President.
No, I don't want to stop a thought you had. But we have made the first announcement of a private sector partner, and this is the biggest hospital network in the state. Their CEO came to the announcement, and so there'll be a sequence of these things. I do have a CEO roundtable, and these conversations have taken place, but we can't do it without the full sign-off of our partners. And I know that puts us in a little bit chicken and egg situation, and there may be continuing frustration about how many, but we are now starting announcements. We had one yesterday where we had this morning, where we had 2 Congress people, we had a state representative, we had the governor, we had the leadership of the economic development community, we had the mayor of the town of Springfield. It was galvanic, in terms of catalytic. So when we're ready, I think what I can promise you is when they're ready, you'll see them quickly, when they're ready for prime time. But we don't want to raise undue expectations or put our partners in false positions where we kind of name drop and until they're ready formally to agree with that. But what I'm getting from your question, and maybe I should be explicit about this, but you want us to move fastest. faster. That's what I'm hearing.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. We like that. We like the legislator who's urging us on. That's
Yeah, well,
wonderful.
there's not a great tradition of it coming from Springfield, but let's try to change that. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about, and I appreciate the indulgence, Mr. Chairman. We've talked a little bit about protecting the state's investment, and that's important. And the chairman brought up a comment that was attributed to the governor that caused a lot of us some concern in the Champaign-Urbana area, right? Where it talked kind of about that nobody wants to go to Champaign-Urbana anymore, which now there's been an apology tour, and the guy rode the bus, and it was great. But there is a lot of consternation and concern. I see you're handing it to the right person here. That we are taking our focus off a campus that we've been building for 150 years and moving it to a metropolitan area. And I'll take it one step further. It's not even so much that, oh, are we moving the flagship from the Urbana-Champaign campus to Chicago, because the governor actually said we're creating a fourth campus, which would, in theory, the argument would be draw from the resources of all three of our campuses to create something else. Then we move on to July 26th, where from the other party, just to be equal opportunity, Mayor Rahm Emanuel spoke to Chicago Next and said, quote, "U of I is moving computer science and engineering to the 78 neighborhood on the south side of Chicago." Thanks for that. I got about 15 texts from people in the room and videos of that. So, as luck would have it, we have the department head of electrical and computer engineering here at the table. And I was asking about you this morning on the radio, actually, and said some nice things about you, but I said, he said, is it good or is it bad that you're the interim director? And I said, it really depends on your perspective, because those of us in Champaign will say, well, we have now someone who's in charge of this that has been on the U of I Champaign campus, Urbana-Champaign rather, since 1994. You certainly recognize, and a lot of credit goes to you and your team for what you've built over the last 25 years and what you have here. The flip side is, isn't this exactly going into the quote of Mayor Emanuel? Who would you, if you're moving the campus, you'd start with a department head, and you'd start dragging them from Champaign-Urbana up to this fourth campus to create in music, it'd be a super group. I suppose you take the best of all the campuses to create something new, and this goes into my earlier paranoia of, are we cherry picking from other universities, from what we've built to create something new here? Can you talk to me about that?
I'm happy to. These are all great questions. First, let me make a few statements. The Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering at Urbana-Champaign is not moving to Chicago. As far as I know, the Department of Computer Science is not moving to Chicago. The College of Engineering at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign is not moving to Chicago, and we're not creating a fourth campus. Okay, we're creating something very new, something very different, and something innovative. I still live in Urbana-Champaign, and for the foreseeable future, I am going to live in Urbana-Champaign. I'm going to travel extensively, right? I will spend time in Chicago, I will spend time in Springfield, I will spend time in other hub locations throughout the state, and I will remain a professor of electrical and computer engineering at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. What I think is very different about the vision of what we're trying to do here is we're trying to improve the whole state by breaking down the boundaries. I really don't like to think about where do you live or where is this kind of thing. Through technology and through creating a bigger community, we're going to bring innovation to the entire state. Now, there are advantages in innovation for staying in Urbana-Champaign. There are advantages of innovation for being in Chicago. And what we want to do is bring those unique advantages of each place, and I just gave you two examples of places, but we just opened an innovation hub in Springfield this morning, right? And so we want to give the unique advantages of being in each place and spread that around the state. So I'm going to go, just like Ed, although it'll be more by car and less by plane, although I'm sure I'll be flying around a lot too. I'm going to go wherever I need to go to get the job done. But I don't think you should think of any faculty member being picked up and transported permanently to another place. These faculty members, just like we did when I worked to create the research center and innovation hub in Singapore, these faculty are going to commute. They're going to create innovation in a way that transcends space, transcends distance, and that's what we're going to do. You're going to see investments in Chicago using the money that we're so thankful for. You're going to see investments in Urbana. You're going to see investments in Springfield. You're going to see investments other places as well. So this is about the whole state, and it's not about moving a organization of a group of people from one place to another. It's creating connections so that the University of Illinois at Chicago and the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and Springfield and the other state universities, as we have here today, can all work together in a more effective way. I mean, that truly is the way we're going.
I appreciate that vision, and this is something that I've told Mr. President more times than he's cared to hear. What I want to be clear, I think, and that many of us that have talked about this, is that we see this, it's not just about protecting your little province, right? It's not just about provincial interests. It's understanding that with universities, so much of it is reputation, so much of it is how do we attract the students to DeKalb and to Macomb and those other places. And so what we want to make sure is that DPI brings the best in and is really something that we see an addition to. It brings something to, as opposed to subtracting from the individual campuses and moving them to a metropolitan area. So I look forward to that as we continue to grow.
Your vision and my vision are spot on and identical in this way. In fact, I mean, just to end maybe quickly, to say, by creating something like DPI and creating the connections through the Illinois Innovation Network throughout the state, we're going to be able to recruit faculty to the state of Illinois that we wouldn't recruit before. And those faculty will come to our various campuses. The same way with students. We are going to create something that's so unique, an educational model that's different and unique, and we'll tell you more about that as we go forward as well, that it's going to enhance our reputation, enhance our recognition as one of the premier residential universities.
Thank you, Director.
I can't resist, but I'm also a faculty member in the same department that Bill was chair of until a couple of days ago, so he's been my boss as well.
No more, Tim. Now you're my boss.
Okay, but you're exactly right, and I think this is an important point to drive home again and again. I can say categorically, this is not going to be a fourth university granting degrees with its own apparatus that will be competing with our. This is the way you raise the bar for all of our universities and our university system, and I think Northern Illinois University and because I used to belong to another university in the Midwest whose name begins with the letter M. It's a big block letter. They could not do something as bold as we are able to do because of the configuration of assets we have in this state that are underutilized. We export people, we export resources, we export venture capital. We don't take advantage of the intellectual heft that we have here. And when you add in, yes, University of Chicago and Northwestern University and Tel Aviv and the other, you've got 5 of the world's top 100 universities collaborating on our home turf. It's going to be a recruitment vehicle for companies to come to Research Park in Urbana-Champaign, for professors to join existing professors to participate and generate new opportunities to connect to industry, etc. This is game-changing, and I think this has to be looked at by our community leaders as well as the university pointy head folks as something that is just incredible opportunity to raise the reputation of Urbana-Champaign, UIC, Springfield, Northern Illinois University, and our other partners, and doing it with modern technology, with an emphasis on the key social technical challenges of our time, with full-blown public-private partnerships, and now with this incredible catalytic state investment, which is, I think, extremely wise for the state to do this. This is how you build the tax base of a state. And where we go, the whole Midwest can go as well. So I could go on, but I'm a little competitive as well. And I do live in Urbana-Champaign, and I have no intention of moving anywhere else. So,
Well, I appreciate that. And frankly, I appreciate all of your presence here today. I think to come and answer the tough questions that we've been posing privately is certainly appreciated. I think it's probably a little more clear as to why Ed keeps planting poison ivy in my yard. I'm not that great to be around, so I appreciate that as well and understand it. I do want to, while we're here, I do want to compliment the University of Illinois system and the trustees in the room. You are thinking boldly and talking about big things. We are going to continue to ask for some specifics, and hopefully we can keep working a timeline out to answer these questions. But just, this week, the announcement that we were basically going to a tuition waiver for middle and lower income families, that's a big thing. And so I appreciate, we've been asking you from this building, hey, can we help? Can we find ways to help solve some of these problems? You stepped up in a big way. And so I also want to congratulate you on that, and hopefully we'll keep working toward those solutions as well. Thank you all.
Senator Murphy, Senator Cunningham, Senator Rose, and then me. Senator Murphy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I hate to start after that eloquent accolades, but I just, I want you to know, too, that I supported the appropriation for this because the concept sounded exactly what we need in Illinois and exactly what we need to bring back some of those 72,000 students that left here. But I just have I'm a little surprised, like Senator McGuire, of the speed that this is moving at. And one of my concerns is, we have a number of unutilized college campuses in the Chicago area and state-funded ones. So did you give any consideration to retrofitting those and enhancing those, rather than, I understand donated property is always a great concept and to build new, but I didn't really think that this money was going to go towards facility. I thought that more towards the needs of developing the program versus a physical site. So could you just elaborate a little on how you got to this particular point?
Sure. So, of course, we wanted to build something that really drew the attention of the country and the world, so that we could really make sure we did attract major corporations to the state, that we attracted major international partners from other universities and so on. So we were thinking of a large investment that would allow us to build something that really was also live, learn, work, play, an environment that we thought our own students would like to make sure they went to, instead of to Silicon Valley or to the Boston area or to Austin and some other areas. So part of the idea was a critical mass of something new that really caught people's attention. And maybe back to the point when Tim was saying about raising the reputations, we want to raise the reputation of the state. We don't understand why, when we have so much talent here and so much strength, that we would have people not thinking of Illinois and Chicago as the place that innovation is really happening, as opposed to, say, the East and West Coast and so on. So we felt we had to have something new and big. And then we wanted to make sure that every partner across the state is welcome to join us in this. And where possible, we would like to make investments in those local regions that are going to further the goals of the DPI and the network. And so we have in mind a plan that will make investments, and we're focused largely on our own campuses this week. We'll have some announcements about Springfield, as we did this morning, very exciting, about Urbana and about Chicago at UIC, and we'll have others from other universities, NIU, and so on, coming forward. So we had in mind that any partners may join us, and then it's a collective activity. But we needed something that was big and central and bold that sort of attracted all this attention.
Can I add, please? Thank you for that question, Senator. There are many unmet needs in public higher education in the state of Illinois, including the deferred maintenance needs that was Senator McGuire talked about earlier, and many needs, many communities that need a boost. And we want to be part of those solutions as well. We want to be part of raising the whole water in the harbor in a way, so that all boats can rise. This is an open innovation plan. It's not a closed partnership between sort of cognoscenti that want to work together and keep everybody else at bay. This is open innovation, and it can grow. It can grow internationally, and as well with some of those public universities in particular around the state whose local communities desperately need economic development, for many reasons. This is a way to connect to something that's big, bold, and yes, indeed, this is attractive to major companies that might want to relocate or might want to develop, etc. So this is a coming into existence, something that can work at both ends of that spectrum. The unmet needs, which are manifold, and I know the legislative community is working hard on that, and we're coming out of this long impasse period, which didn't help at all, to a new state where we need to solve these problems. We need to identify the problems and we need to fix them. In our open innovation thinking, these hubs, and there are going to be many of them, have to be tailored to the local economic needs and appropriate for that. We don't want a system where you have region A competing against region D and you have a winner and a loser. That's not what the state needs. The state needs to have tailored economic development in those regions. We are believers, because this is where we live and work, that public higher education is the appropriate place for those developments to occur. University of Illinois system, as the flagship, has to lead the way. But it's open, and we're just, again, simply delighted at Northern's pioneering participation in this kind of effort. And maybe I could ask President Freeman to say a couple of words about how this works outside of the University of Illinois system.
Thank you. As the president of Northern Illinois University, I want to say thank you to everyone who is paying more attention to public higher education and our needs at the moment. And I want to say something first before I talk about how we became engaged with the Illinois Innovation Network about this conflict that's been suggested to exist between the deferred maintenance needs on our campuses, which are real, and the opportunity to leverage this type of investment to bring in more public partners and to spark more innovation. Northern Illinois University has a boiler project that's going forward in the deferred maintenance appropriation that's coming, and we are very grateful. I am very grateful that I will no longer be sleepless at night worrying about a boiler that's older than I am, that can no longer get parts, that if it fails, we can't keep our campus running. But fixing that boiler is not going to attract economic development to the city of DeKalb. It's not going to help us keep our most creative faculty, and it's not going to bring in students who have great ideas about innovation across the food system. This partnership with the Illinois Innovation Network, our ability and an incentive to collaborate with the College of Agriculture, Consumer and Environmental Sciences in Urbana so that we can help farmers think about innovation across the food system, think about what crops to plant in the winter and how there might be a new food product that could be marketed to create that need so that they can have their land operating at top utilization. Those are the kind of things that we can see happening here. The city of DeKalb and NIU are very excited about this opportunity to build on our heritage. Barbed wire was invented in DeKalb. Everybody knows about DeKalb genetics and the flying ear of corn, and this is an opportunity for us to return to those roots in a very different environment, take advantage of our area as a peri-urban area, our university as a university that brings together students who come from urban and rural and suburban areas, some of whom grow our food and some of whom think food comes in a package. And we're very excited about this opportunity. The University of Illinois system approached us about this while they were approaching many other universities. They went on a speaking and listening tour. It gave us a real reason to start to put the budget impasse behind us and dream and think about what could we be doing and what could we be doing better together than we could be doing alone. Relationships are resources. Collaboration is better than competition. It's better than unnecessary duplication. And for faculty and staff and students who've had very little reason to dream big for a couple of years, this is a wonderful opportunity, and we're very much looking forward to it.
And again, I appreciate that. My concern is we already have a divide, a significant economic divide in the state of Illinois. And as a suburban representative, I'm thrilled that it's in the Chicago area, but I just do think we have to be cautious that the physical presence creates economic interests and ancillary economic opportunities, and those could be missed to downstate areas. So just for the record, I want to state that. But I do have one more question. You touched upon establishing a separate board. Could you drill down a little on how you envision that board working? How many trustees or whatever board members you're going to call them? Who's going to appoint them? Things of that nature.
So we have thought a lot about this, but we've made no moves yet in actually determining with any detail who would be a member of the board beyond the president of the University of Illinois. We want to make sure that we maintain leadership, but we recognize that there will be both corporate and university partners that would be ultimately significantly invested in this, that would have to have some oversight in terms of how this, the DPI itself would operate. We also have in mind, so there are these two organizations. There's the Discovery Partners Institute, which is itself going to be a sort of an open innovation hub that will have multiple universities. Then there will be the Illinois Innovation Network, each of which is focused around an Illinois university across the state. So these organizations will be related to each other. There will be an oversight group for the Illinois Innovation Network, and we would like to get our potential partners together, some of which are committed and some of which we're having conversations with still, to figure out how that will be governed. We've already begun to think about what are the principles of the Illinois Innovation Network, and we want to have a discussion of that. And we want to talk also about the collaborative technologies that I mentioned earlier, how we would make sure we gather requirements from our partners and understand how that would work best so that we can share classrooms, share faculty, have open innovation with companies that might work with multiple teams of students at multiple universities here. So we have in mind these two different organizations, and over the fall we intend to really put some structure in those so that we can begin to govern. Now in the short term, we have groups of people that we want to bring on as advisory members to help us sort of take our bootstrap up from a sort of an embryonic organization to one that actually have a governance process, and we think this will take more or less the next year to get in place.
So you don't see this body having any presence on that board, and so then who is going to be your taxpayer representative in your system? It's not on.
We don't have the governance blueprint in place. We've taken concepts all the way through to potential blueprints, but we need more conversations like this, I think. I think obviously the taxpayer contribution that happened in May really changed our thinking tremendously. This is now forever rooted in state legislative action. Taxpayer action at a state public flagship university. That's wonderful. That is just wonderful, and that needs to be honored in the governance scheme. So I look forward to your thoughts and comments on how to do that in an appropriate way. Now, there are lessons to be learned about governance systems, slowing things down, food fights, and we don't want our faculty to recoil from a governance system that looks like it's not going to liberate them to do amazing things or bring partners in. So this is a tricky area, I confess, one where we're going to need to have conversations. And I think your earlier comment as well about the haves and have-nots in society is completely pertinent to this conversation, because yes, we need to develop wealth, we need to develop economic activity, but we also need to create more social equity in this state and in the city of Chicago and in the rural settings. And let's find a way to do that through economic pursuit. And I think for us, it always comes down to our students. It always really ultimately comes down to the student experience. And those will be the movers and shakers and changers and designers of the state of Illinois. And we have them under our wings collectively as we speak. We've got to give them this kind of setting. So it's about wealth creation, but also social equity. And I say, just candidly, that's also tricky. That's easy to say, easy for me to say. It's tricky to say. It's not, quote, the Silicon Valley model, which is more just strictly about wealth creation and value for stakeholders and shareholders. So we want to pioneer a new model. In fact, we want to call it the Illinois model. And yes, we're thinking boldly. No, we're not smoking anything. It is time. It is time in this century, in this setting, in this state that's had a lot of issues and has self-inflicted wounds, frankly, that were unnecessary, but together we can get to this next step. So your two questions were right on point. Thank you.
I think both what President Killeen and Vice President Seidel said was really spot on, but I just want to add one small operational thing. The issue of social equity is very much on our minds. One of our created working groups is on culture and society. We're thinking very specifically about how we blend together technology, engineering, science, together with culture and society and entrepreneurship to do something very different, to not have the Silicon Valley model, but have the new Illinois model. So we don't have it figured out, but we have an active working group, culture and society, that Ed and I are working with very directly, that's thinking about those issues.
Well, thank you for that. And we look forward, and the Higher Ed Board likes innovation. So you can work with this committee, and we won't bog you down. Thank you
No,
for your
I'm here to
comments.
speed up.
Okay.
Senator Cunningham.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, President Killeen and President Freeman in particular, for coming here today and giving these presentations. We've had an opportunity, President Killeen, to talk about this, and you know, like Senator Murphy, I am a big supporter of this concept. We need to do a better job in Illinois of connecting the brain power of our campuses to the commercial power we have in Chicago. We've not done that. We need to do it on a multiple university basis. It's done in Northern California. It's done in the Boston area. It's done in North Carolina. We haven't done that very well at all here in Illinois, and we've lost economic development and the jobs that come along with that as a result of that. So I think this is a really important step in the right direction. Of course, the devil is in the detail. That's why we're here, and there are a lot of unanswered questions still. This makes for a great PowerPoint presentation, but it's still, I think, a little esoteric to members of this body and to members of the public who might be paying attention to it. So, and with that in mind, you know, maybe you could help people understand what this is a little bit better if we can just sort of go through some examples. Let's say I'm a computer science major or grad student in DeKalb or Urbana, or a professor at either campus, and I come up with an idea related to cybersecurity, you know, some advanced encryption. Or let's say I own, I'm a businessman and I own a seed company in Decatur, and I have an idea on how I can grow a plant with less water. How does DPI help me in either one of those situations? And how does it help me in a way that I am not being helped right now?
So it's a really good question. So I will try to illustrate answers with specific examples, but let me just say, first of all, of course, as we like to brag, we're already very good at doing these kinds of things in our universities. And you know, we were talking earlier about the great innovations coming out of electrical engineering, but we think we can do better, we can accelerate innovation, and we can address bigger scale problems if we create a venue like the DPI that is connected to a series of hubs across the state, where each of the hubs would be able to participate by having faculty and students spending some time at this site where there will be a collaboration that is at scales that you don't have in a typical department or even in an interdisciplinary center. I mean, for example, on the institute, I mean, on the campus in Urbana-Champaign, there's this wonderful place called the Beckman Institute. I was trained there as a postdoc. It changed my career. I worked with I'm a physicist by training, but I worked with computer scientists, and I worked with people in computer and in data and in visualization and in applied mathematics, and then I worked with companies at ways that I never thought would be possible for somebody with my background. But that's still a fairly small scale thing compared to what you could do if you brought multiple universities together at this site. So what would students do? Let's say students in the engineering college in Urbana, let's say that there was a typical student that spent a year at the DPI and then came back. Well, if you think about, first of all, expanding the engineering college, if you have on average, a few thousand students at the site up there, then you can expand the engineering college by 25%. They're Urbana students, or they might be NIU students, but they spend time there. Then they get an experience there that's different from what they get on their home campus. It's focused on working in teams. So you would take classes where companies are working side by side with you to address problems that you wouldn't normally address in the classroom. So this would be one thing. You'd have this environment where companies are really, really right there with you. They're not over there. They're actually integrated. So the company R&D staff are there with you. And you meet with students from art and design, as well as from electrical engineering and physics and business, all working together in teams. So that's a very important part of it, so that practical experience where the companies are providing sort of the direction of what the project is. Another aspect of this is that then the students there would have ready-made ability to do internships at the companies that are based in Chicago. Now, of course, we're interested in having companies, not just the ones that are there. I mean, of course, we want them too, but we want new ones to come there because we'll have this supply of talent that they won't find elsewhere, not just from our own universities, but also from around the world. So it's a global destination for talent that brings in companies, that opens up more internship possibilities. This last semester, we've started pioneering this program called the City Scholars Program, where Urbana engineering students are spending a semester, and they're all taking 15-hour internships. They're paid, and they're all in electrical engineering and computer science. But you think they're working just for Google and Microsoft? No, they're working for Walgreens, and they're working for insurance companies. They're working, every company wants these kinds of students. They pay them for 15 hours a week, but they also take classes so they don't lose time towards their degrees. And they love it. It's intense. It's a really intensive experience, but they love the experience of this. So then there's another aspect of this, which is that the students will be able to all be trained in entrepreneurship. And this is a key part of this as well. So although students, of course, are trained in entrepreneurship at each of our campuses, now all of our participating campuses will be able to send students here trained in intensive entrepreneurship with people who actually do venture capital. And we think when President Khalil was talking about stemming the flow of venture capital out of the state, we want to have a lot more big startups that are happening there. And so all the students will be able to be trained in this, have boot camps, and maybe even startup companies as part of their undergraduate training program. So this is not unusual in terms of our vision for this. Now, we'll have international students coming as well. They have different experiences, and one reason we focused on Israel is that they produce more companies per capita than any other country on earth. They have produced so many companies, they don't have nearly the population in Israel to actually handle them. So our value proposition to the Israeli startups is that we are going to open up American markets for you and provide a soft landing. Come to Chicago, get started, and it turns out you're going to do something in agriculture. You really need a home in DeKalb, or you might need it in Champaign, or maybe you need it in Carbondale. So we'll provide these sort of glide paths for them all. And then the students all get to work in this international cohort. So I try to provide some specific reasons why the DPI would have programmatic activities that are going to be very rich and exciting for the students, as well as something that's going to bring in economic development across the state. Does that address your question?
I think so. But the element of having it in Chicago, obviously the idea is access to capital, access to the actual companies that are there. Do you feel right now that there's some impediment to those companies getting involved, whether it's in Urbana or DeKalb or other campuses where that just isn't happening now?
No, things are happening around our campuses in DeKalb or in Urbana. I'm most familiar with Urbana. The research park in Urbana is growing by leaps and bounds. In fact, it's growing as fast as we can build buildings there as companies come in, and they love it, and they're there particularly to have access to the students. But some of the companies, for example, Caterpillar, which is one of our deepest partners, has presence in Chicago and in Urbana and in many other places. So it's not an either or, and they have different things that they can do in the different sites. And so Chicago is a major transportation hub with other universities there, and we built this critical mass site of the DPI where things are very deeply integrated. There will be offerings there that I think will attract companies to come into the state, as well as us to branch out and work with our campuses locally. So it's not an either or. There are different things you can do with the different sites.
If we have just a couple of minutes, I want to add a couple of things. I think Vice President Seidel did a good job, but I want to be clear about what DPI is and what DPI isn't. These are all great examples of things that could happen at DPI. As we said, we're not creating a new university. We're not creating degree programs that would be granted from DPI. It's not a place for faculty to have tenure. What's so unique about it is it's a collaboration place and a meeting place that will allow things to happen that can't happen at any individual hub, right? So all the various hubs, and then all the out-of-state and out-of-country collaborators that will be drawn to DPI, but then ultimately drawn to all the sites in the Illinois Innovation Network, is what's very special about it. So again, we don't think of it as being a monolithic place that's going to be built up and be separate from the other places. If I'm a student, I'll go there for some time. And Ed gave the example of having a very different kind of residential experience than the one you could have in any of our campuses or any in Northern Illinois University. Have a really unique residential experience that adds value, that attracts students to our partner universities, and allows them to make progress to degree at the same time. If I'm a faculty member, and we were just having discussions yesterday, Ed and I, with physics faculty members, and we were talking with them about how the sum is greater than the parts if we build up expertise in Urbana, but at the same time we create a collaboration space for those faculty members. So again, they're not here or there permanently, they are going back and forth and they have advantages of both places. And if I'm a corporation, I come to an environment, again, within the normal rules of how we do intellectual property with the university, I can come and I can participate. And in fact, one of the greatest values that as a faculty member I have, and I collaborate with many, many companies today, is that they help determine what these real challenging problems are. So they'll come and they bring value to us by helping us understand what the real societal challenges and problems are that we need to solve. And then we contribute to them and to the economic development of the state because we appropriately license intellectual property to them that helps them in their companies. And so for me, it's all about collaboration. It's about a meeting space. It's about creating a sum that's bigger than the individual parts by bringing people together. And that's where we're going.
Embedded in your question is, are we doing enough today? And I just want to say I don't think so. I think we're leaving a lot of value on the table. Classic story, you had a distinguished professor with a patent, postdoc wants to start a company. They started successfully at a research park. They've grown, now they're 20 employees. They go to the coast. That is not particularly smart.
So you've seen that,
Illinois.
you've seen that happen, companies that start.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Hey, have you ever attempted to put any value on that? How much?
We are doing an econometric study
Okay.
right now, and we will come out with that, and it'll be a staggering number.
Of lost economic value that the state.
It'll be posed in what this can do,
Okay.
but you could easily say that that's equal to lost without doing anything.
But you can point to a number of companies that were started.
We can point to companies today who were worth $75 billion last year, who started in the University of Illinois system and left.
Okay.
Today.
Thank
And
you.
there are many companies that you'd recognize their names, yeah.
Okay, that might be useful, for the committee to have, and for the public to know about. Thank you.
Senator Rose.
Thanks, welcome. Plato would be pleased to see that his utopian republic is finally coming to fruition in Chicago's South Side. So let's go over some minor details here. How much money has the Midwest Partners committed specifically?
We're
Is
talking
it
about
Midwest
land.
related, the developer?
Midwest related. We're talking
Is
about-
their commitment solely the land, or have they put dollars into it?
Well, we're talking about both sides of that equation.
So when this thing was announced October of 2017, this is a $1.2 billion effort. The state's got $500 million here. Ed previously mentioned several hundreds of millions of dollars. Does that get you back to 1.2 billion, or are we missing a couple hundred million here or there?
We really think that we're beyond 1.2 billion now in the feasible outcome of this. We're already billion.
So Ed's going to raise more than a couple hundreds of millions.
Yes. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure I'd put it all on Ed.
What's that?
He lives next door to Senator Bennett, but he's good.
Okay.
I think we do have a team. We have a fundraising team, and we do have verbal commitments from major donors.
Okay, how much are the commitments?
I can't say, sorry, but certainly beyond $100 million.
When you say commitments, are these like verbal conversations, or are these in writing?
These are verbal conversations that need to be put in writing, and we have
Okay.
teams that are used to
So
putting
you've
things
had
in
conversations
writing.
about commitments.
Yeah, and there have been some public statements too that you may have picked up on.
Hans, if I could ask you a quick follow-up. Can the build-only bonds be used for planning and development, or is it for concrete only?
The bond funds can be used for the planning phase as well. There are a
Planning for construction,
planning for construction,
but
right?
not planning for what this is, like Ed Seidel, for example.
I'm not sure I understand what you're
Well, Ed
asking.
Seidel is planning for an entity to be created. He's not necessarily, that doesn't necessarily mean he's planning a building. So I guess my direct question is, can those build-only bond funds be used for what they're doing, generally talking about a world entity, or are they limited solely to design and engineering of a construction project?
So the bond funds, which at this point have not yet been given to the university.
Correct.
Are for design of construction, installation, schematic drawings, construction management, observation, environmental assessment, wetlands, archaeological surveys, historical studies. Those are all the various uses of Build Illinois bond funds in the planning phase.
Okay.
There are
But-
also land acquisition and those sorts of
Okay,
things.
thanks, Hans. So how much has the university internally committed to cover the rest of this? Because that's limited to construction.
We've committed $6 million in the next several years to sort of the internal planning phases and
Okay.
staffing up the office, which includes Dr. Sanders, and so we need to staff up.
And if
It's
I
our
could-
understanding
Yeah, go
that
ahead.
excuse me for interrupting, but,
Sure.
but that the non-tax exempt bond components of the bonding vehicle can be applied to operating costs in the near term, and we're talking that through with the executive session offices now.
The non-tax exempt portions of bonding can be used for operational expenses?
That's our understanding.
Hans, do you agree with that?
The statute allows, there's two different concepts here, right? There's federal tax law, which allows for taxable versus tax exempt proceed usage. In general, bond proceeds from tax exempt bonds can be used for a variety of operational type expenditures. But one of the issues that we're working through right now with respect to the Discovery Partners Institute is whether or not Build Illinois bond funds in particular can be used for specific operating expenses within the confines of the statute as it's written. One of the things that we're going to need to see from the University of Illinois, and this will be part of the grant process, is a budget, and specifically what they intend to spend bond proceeds on And then within the confines of the statute, it would then be determined whether or not any of that could be used for the particular operating expenses. Let me give you a specific example here. Lease agreements. My understanding of the statute is lease agreements cannot be paid for out of Build Illinois bond proceeds. So it depends on what the spending is on. And that all needs to be determined. I can't tell you whether or not the particular spending is going to qualify or not at this point.
Okay, so that's a little bit different than we just had a second ago. Okay, so let's keep going. Congratulations on your fortuitous timing of your first announcement today right before this hearing. What did you announce exactly for U of I Springfield?
We announced that UIS is going to merge with the Innovate Springfield Business Incubator, which is downtown Springfield in physical location. We've always been supporting, but now it's going to be formally part of the university as a hub of the IIN. And in that arrangement, there has been gathering together of funds from various sponsors, city, county, the Community Economic Development Fund, and the University of Illinois, to get to $1.5 million. So that was announced this morning in the physical location.
And you're making an announcement in Urbana tomorrow, or
we will.
Thursday?
It won't be what it will be of the emphasis areas for the Urbana-Champaign hub, which Chancellor Jones will be announcing.
Is Chancellor Jones here today?
No, he's not.
Is anybody here on his behalf?
Well, we're all.
So I'm
here.
As excited as I am about what you guys have got going on in Chicago. I represent 10 counties in Central Illinois. So why don't you tell us what we're doing in Central Illinois?
Well, the emphasis areas will be more specifically announced tomorrow. I don't want to steal his thunder, but it's for faculty. We have a faculty town hall meeting tomorrow. But they will be connected to the thematic emphasis area of the IIN, notably digital augmentations and commercial augmentations of the research park. We need to, in Urbana-Champaign, build out our capacity to have companies that originate there and can stay there and can grow. And we think that there is a potential for doubling the size of the research park. And we want to set out to do that as part of the hub concept. And the digital aspects of what Urbana-Champaign really delivers, not just to the IIN, but actually to the world, in terms of supercomputing, data mining, predictive analytics, cybersecurity, all of those things are going to be strongly emphasized in this effort. So it'll be, in a way, a nerve center for the overall effort.
So you talked about...
But you'll be there.
Food and agriculture. I won't be, but thank you.
Okay.
You talked about food and agriculture as well as another concept. So I appreciate my good friend Senator Cunningham's mention of a small seed company in Decatur, but Decatur actually has ADM and Tate & Lyle, which are two of the biggest companies in the entire world. Exactly what would be the linkage for food and agriculture being 40 miles away from Champaign-Urbana?
Yeah, I think you take that one.
Sure. So in food and agriculture, we have in mind something that's quite comprehensive that goes all the way from the genomics of plant science and crops and fields and soil conditions and so on, how you do the science of crops, all the way through to the logistics and the business side of food in Chicago. And so when we talk about food and agriculture, we think about this entire ecosystem. And to be able to work with companies like Tate & Lyle or ADM, or also companies like McDonald's or Monsanto. So they cover all aspects of this. And then within our different university-based hubs, there are different areas of connections with those companies and different kinds of expertise, and then these would all come together. So I'm not sure if that's getting at your question, but...
Well, the president mentioned data analytics.
That's right.
As the main thrust of the Urbana campus, and to me it would seem, when you've got the IBRL opening in 2 months, you've got this great ag job-producing behemoth down the way, you've got the Midwest Inland Port that now connects every major port in North America to the rest of the world in Decatur. And it's cheaper than, no offense, Chairman McGuire, it's cheaper than the port to the north of us, because there's no toll roads.
If I can just jump in, yeah, I mean, what we're going to talk about tomorrow, or Chancellor Jones will talk about tomorrow, is not exclusive. We have tremendous intellectual strength and assets that have been developed over the last 150 years, including in food and ag, and notably, I'd say, in genomics, and in photosynthesis and so forth. And those are game-changing inventions that are coming out of
So is that
the
part of your announcement tomorrow?
That will be part of the thinking all along. Yep, absolutely. Food and ag is a major theme in the whole DPI-IIN, as is, and of course, it is going to benefit also from the IT developments.
I think it's important to say that there will be announcements tomorrow, but this will not be all the announcements that will involve Urbana. Obviously, we're still working on the concepts, and so President Killeen gave some hints without trying to steal all the thunder of our Chancellor tomorrow about what his announcements would be, but we're working with the Chancellor for a series of announcements, of which the first will be tomorrow.
So let's go through some technical questions here. The fall of 2019 will be the first class someone had mentioned. How many will that be? Is that a freshman class, or is that are those people interns? What does that mean?
So remember that we said that there are not degree programs at this. This is not. So these will be students that come and spend time at DPI.
From somewhere else.
They come from system universities. They might come from partner universities, working those things out, and they come to have an experience at the DPI. They don't come to get a degree. They don't come as freshmen and so forth. They come to spend time at DPI.
So on that note, you're hiring out faculty. How many faculty are you anticipating hiring in the initial phase?
Go ahead, Jim.
You go ahead.
Well, can I
We're-
start
we're
then?
all eager to
I'll
answer
start
this. Go
since
ahead.
I think any one of us could probably answer. We have just completed a hiring boost across the system. We've hired 10 faculty, stellar faculty in the last year since we started this. We're going to now take that forward in the DPI-IIN perspective. And so the numbers, Ed will give you the rough number that is our goal.
Well, over time, we'd like to be able to bring in as many as 100 new faculty. This is the long-term goal. In the first phase of this, however, we're talking about bringing in an existing cohort of faculty that will allow us to operate not only locally around the hubs, but at the DPI in particular at 200 South Wacker Drive, we have 3 classrooms and 20 offices. That's what we've leased out for now, and that's actually open as of now. That will probably grow over the next couple of years as we build up towards what would be the opening of the first new building, which we're anticipating being at the 78, and that would be in 3 years. So you could imagine something of order a dozen faculty that are existing faculty that are involved, and we already have at least a dozen faculty involved in working groups, but actually working to help pull classes to build the intellectual environment starting next year, and that will grow towards a cohort of probably several dozen faculty that would open up around the time of the first new building.
So your first 30 are coming internally? Is that what I just heard you say?
Yeah, they would come from internal
So you're not
sources.
you're not hiring new people right now.
So
Well, no, we are. Go ahead, Bill.
yeah, let me try to clarify, and I'm sorry if this is not completely clear. Faculty, as I said, will have their tenure homes at partner universities, at U of I system universities, and at partner universities. So in a sense, as we said earlier, faculty will not have tenure, and they will not, if you will, be hired by DPI. So when we talk about faculty hiring, we talk about increasing the size of the faculty at our system universities in order to create expertise, to augment the expertise of our existing faculty, and to increase capacity.
Yeah, I got that part.
So, I mean, just to give you an example, in the last 5 years, in electrical and computer engineering alone, I've hired 35 new tenure-track faculty. That kind of hiring program, in order to ensure that that ECE department remains very strong as we create capacity to be able to participate in things like DPI, is essential. So when we talk about an aggressive hiring program, what we mean is as the University of Illinois system, we will create incentives in order to allow faculty to be hired by our system universities to create capacity, so then, as Ed said, they can be resident at the DPI.
So I appreciate the clarification, but I'm still confused. We talked about 100 new faculty, and not at DPI, they'd be through the systems. In the initial phase, you're not hiring any new faculty.
The next year, we intend to continue hiring faculty. I've launched a system-wide faculty recruitment planning
Okay.
effort on all 3 campuses.
So
and
how
that's-
many are being recruited in Champaign?
Let me just finish my train of thought, because we're not recruiting today faculty in Urbana-Champaign for DPI.
I got that.
Very shortly, we will start doing that. We do have a stellar faculty recruitment program that Urbana-Champaign has benefited from in the last year. We're talking 6 or 7 world-class researchers. We intend to leverage that as we move into the future by adding the inducement that faculty can come and get connected to DPI and IIN. It's a tremendous inducement to, it's a recruiting. It's not only recruiting for companies, it's recruiting for faculty. And their home base will be at one of the universities.
And I
in a
guess
regular
my
department
point
that they
here,
will-
President, is we need to be precise with our terms, because we say things like we have commitments, but we have verbal conversations. We don't have anything in writing. So when you say you're hiring 100 faculty, you're not hiring 100 new faculty. These are 100 people that are coming from what already exists, and then each individual campus has its own hiring program.
Well, each individual campus has its own hiring program today, and we're continuously hiring, and people are continuously retiring. So this is kind of what we do. We hire faculty. We are planning to hire 100 additional faculty to support DPI.
Okay.
Those new faculty
That's
will
what I was
have their
asking about
tenure
originally.
homes in existing
Okay.
departments.
So of those 100 new faculty,
Right.
my original question, how many of them are at Urbana homes, tenure track or tenured, UIC homes, tenure track or tenured, and UIS homes, tenure track or tenured?
I don't know today what that and we don't have a plan to say there's a quota here and a quota there, but based on experience, it's like 60, 70% Havana, 40% UIC, and a much smaller number at UAS. That's based on the size of the universities and the capacity for research.
Ed,
But
you-
that may change depending on the emphasis areas and how the corporate engagements take off, because we're looking for corporate sponsorship and endowments for these new faculty members as well.
Ed, you mentioned that you had Israeli partners. You used the word partners. Does that mean they've made a financial commitment?
What it means right now is that they have committed to undertaking to have a permanent presence at the DPI that they will fund themselves. And so we don't have a public announcement about those yet, but we've had verbal agreements, and we're working towards public announcements of those commitments. So that means in particular that they would raise their money largely through private philanthropy, and we are working with some of, in fact, literally working with some of their donors to help them achieve that.
So the chairman made a very good point earlier with the budget director, and that is related to other capital needs and deferred maintenance and things of that nature. You know, it's been talked about quite a bit, Tim. This is your number one. Are you prepared if and when there is a capital bill, then maybe some other institutions go ahead of you on that list?
Well, we've been, as you know, we've been advocating for capital investments by the state in public higher ed writ large. I mean, the $3 billion is symptomatic of a disinvestment strategy on the part of the state over the last N years. We want to turn that around, but we want to do it with evidence and demonstration that these things are really needed. We want to see all of public higher education thrive in the state of Illinois. We've got our own issues within UVI system, the deferred maintenance. We've been trying to address them best we can with a lot of philanthropic emphasis as well. We recognize that our sister and partner universities have very significant issues, and we heard about the boiler issue at Northern Illinois University. We strongly support their capital requests as well.
I'm not sure you answered the question, but I'll let you off the hook.
Well, it's your. I think it's your job really to.
Well, I mean, to be
we're gonna
fair,
do our
I mean,
part,
as
yeah.
much as I may have quite a few U of I employees that are in my district as residents, I'm also have, to a lesser extent, Eastern and ISU employees that are also constituents of mine in the 51st Senate district. You know, and they would look at this and say, well, how come, you know, where's our capital funds?
Right. Well, we talked about that earlier, and I think it was a wise investment by you and others to vote for this this specific capital augmentation in the economic development of the state of Illinois. And we're going to do our part in good faith to make that work. And we're certainly open to full-blown participation by those other universities. It's not the full solution for all the raft of problems that the state has, legacy issues, and I will always be urging the state legislature, and particularly this committee, to push hard on addressing the deferred maintenance needs. These are state operating facilities that are serving the youth of Illinois primarily, and it's a collective responsibility to do the best job we can. So you will never find any of us saying that we don't have significant needs, unmet needs in capital.
Professor Director Sanders, you are somewhat of a breath of fresh air on this because we've been trying to get a lot of answers for a long time. You've given quite a bit more definition today. And before I caution the president, who has assured us the mayor of Chicago told him everything will be fine, the mayor of Chicago told George Lucas everything would be fine too, and that didn't look how that turned out. So, Dr. Sanders, will you be living in Urbana or will you be living in Chicago?
I'll be living in well, I live in Mahomet.
Outstanding.
We
like that even better.
Yes, I live in Mahomet. I have an office in Henry Administration Building. In fact, I moved my office from the Electrical and Computer Engineering Building to the Henry Administration Building just last weekend. I'm there full-time now, and I'll be traveling all over the state and, in fact, other places as well to get this project going.
The fact that you're staying in Mahomet may be the most reassuring thing that's been said to date for those of us in Central Illinois. And Ed, it is DeKalb, not DeKalb. Thank you.
Thank you. It's good to be neighbors.
Much has been made by you this afternoon of announcements that you've made about hubs and other steps forward. And before I proceed, I want to credit you with the work you're doing to try to revive the economy in Illinois. I represent one of the Rust Belt cities of Illinois, Joliet. There are many Rust Belt cities in the state. So again, you've told us of the announcements you've made of hubs and other steps forward. Yet, have you filed your grant application with DCEO?
No, we've not filed it yet. We're drafting it. As you heard from some of the comments before, there are complexities about operating versus capital. We're also trying to develop the more concrete size, shape, function of the physical facilities. We've done a lot of work towards that, so we're working on that grant application to DCEO, and that will be for the $500 million and will be forthcoming shortly. I couldn't give you the exact time. One of my colleagues is full-time on this very topic, but it's in early draft form, I would say.
Because I'm struck that you're proceeding apace to enact your vision for DPI, yet I have a list of at least 6 not yets that have been revealed this afternoon. Your application to DCO, has that been filed? Not yet. Have any agreements been signed, such as with Related Midwest? Not yet. Is there clarity on using Build Illinois funds for operational expenses? Not yet. How much private money, can you disclose to us how much private money you've raised? Not yet. Is there a plan for taxpayer representation on the DPI board? Not yet. Is there, and then this is logical, is there a groundbreaking date set? Not yet. Again, given the profound need to revive our state's economy, and given the work that you and others are putting into this, you don't want to be building a house of sand. And there is no document from which we can judge your progress. So would you please provide this committee a monthly update?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, we'd be delighted to do that. And I will immediately delegate that to the person who just came on board last week, because the not yets are honest not yets. I don't think you should see them as negatives in terms of should we have done this by then. We're going to do this right for the state of Illinois. We can't afford to stumble out of the gate with mischaracterizations or anything. So you'll get honesty in those reports too.
Right, and similarly, so that we can do our jobs.
Absolutely, and I understand that.
Oversight of a $500 million appropriation, accountability to our constituents. And President Killeen, during the years that we've known each other, I've noted how often you speak of civil society. And this afternoon you spoke of social equity as one of the principles of DPI. Music to my ears. Yet, in this document which you gave to us, on page 9, under the headline Driving Economic Growth, create 1 million jobs, sounded good to me until I got to this word, globally. That doesn't help my constituent.
I think he's looking at the October presentation from last year.
Oh, yeah.
That doesn't help my constituent who really complained bitterly to me that the only work he can find in Will County is a part-time job driving a school bus. He needs a full-time job with fair pay and full benefits to support his family. Mr. Seidel, you mentioned Caterpillar and its presence in several Illinois cities. Caterpillar's manufacturing presence, of course, is much diminished in Montgomery, in Joliet, in the Peoria area. Caterpillar once had 7,000 employees in my hometown. Next year, it will have 0. The largest employer in Will County now is Amazon. Largely part-time jobs, paying perhaps $13 an hour. Not the same as those manufacturing jobs. It's not your fault they have disappeared. Yet I hope you can understand why I find it disconcerting that on your sheet here about driving economic growth, you posit the number of jobs you will create globally. Would you please, in your next monthly report to us, tell us the number of jobs you predict you will create in the state of Illinois?
Yeah. I'm not sure if next month it's going to be ready, but as I mentioned earlier, we have 2 independent econometric studies underway of the economic impact of the DPIIN, and they will absolutely have estimates of the job creation in the state of Illinois. And so we will be able to get you that as soon as they come off the press. I think, as I remember, it's maybe October, November timeframe, though, before we see those results. But we're getting very highly credentialed external groups looking at the economic impact, not only of the DPIIN looking forward in the state of Illinois, which I think will be substantial numbers, but also in the overall presence of the U of I system in the state of Illinois, and those numbers are going to come out earlier in September. So we're going to do it with authoritative numbers from the experts, and then we'll have a dialogue about whether they're good enough or not good enough. But your major point about the Rust Belt and the erosion of jobs is very significant to us, because that's part of why we exist. I mean, the land-grant mission was designed to create economic enterprise in civil society. At the time, it was agrarian. Now it's all these other facets. With the the onrushing of automation and driverless vehicles, and the kind of corporate world that we're living in now, there's going to be further erosion of jobs. So we need to get ahead of that curve. How do you get ahead of that curve? You look hard at the future economy. You try to co-design it. You worry about jobs in Joliet. They're pertinent to this issue. Unlike additional past models, you started with models. The past models have all been about wealth creation. This model has to be about addressing those questions that you're so keenly worried about. And I would say just personally that if we can't solve these kind of problems in Illinois with the kind of intellectual heft that we can bring to the table, then we're all in a sorry shape, I think. And I'm talking about rural and urban in that instance. These are the most important assets the state has to bear on these issues. I say that with all due modesty. These are the most important assets that the state, and you represent the state. So we want to work with you in good faith, in transparently, and if we're not ready to say something, we're going to have to say we're not ready, and take whatever wrist slaps come about with that. But we will be honest with you, we'll be forthright with you, and we'll try to address these questions on a timely basis with an increased sense of urgency, because I keep coming back to that. Now we're staffing up, as you can see, and we're going to have the ability, and we're partnering up. So these are important, and yes, those announcements may sound a little fuzzy in terms of numbers of faculty and so forth, but they're real, and I think it's demonstrating real enterprise here and real commitment to this major project. And again, I come back to the gratitude we have to the state legislature for passing this appropriation, because it is a game changer, and we're going to do our part to make sure that every element prospers from this, and we don't leave, we don't detract from existing capacities, but we also add value to areas where there are disadvantages that are keenly felt.
We look forward to more communication.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This subject matter hearing of the Senate Higher Education Committee is adjourned. Thank you all. My mistake. Patrick Thompson, are you here? Okay. That was my mistake. So we've heard indulgence, infallibility. I certainly don't possess that. So Patrick Thompson, you filed a witness slip to present oral testimony. Please come to the witness table. Thank you. Mr. Thompson, please identify yourself and then share your comments with the committee.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Thompson. I am the president and owner of Via Inc., and we are a construction firm out of Champaign-Urbana. I've been in business for about 15 years now. 10 years in construction, and before then, 5 years running a nonprofit organization working with at-risk youth and adults. I ran a nonprofit. We had a partnership with the University of Illinois out of College Ed. So I worked with a population of individuals that were had educational achievement gaps, job employment, workforce, and as well as a business owner. And I'm here today because I'm very involved in Champaign-Urbana and wanting to address a population that are not getting jobs. They're failing in school. We have very few African-American businesses in Champaign-Urbana, and when I read about this initiative, as well as a lot of other initiatives, it always seems to appear that there is a African Americans are left out of the planning or involved in that initiative, and that concerns me. That concerns me with this initiative, and so when I saw the hearing today, I decided, well, I'm gonna come and voice my opinion as a business owner and as a citizen. And I do not think these initiatives that are coming out of whether they governor, university, should have fair representation. In order for a community that has been plagued with all kinds of issues not involved, it's a problem. And I've heard a lot today, and I'm still not very familiar about what is going on with this program. I mean, I would like to have something in writing. You know, I'm hoping we can get a transcript. Will transcripts be provided for this hearing that we'll be able to access or get a hold of? Okay. And so my
Yes.
my other comment is that it appears that only major companies are going to be able to benefit from the DPI. So how can a African American business be part of this DPI, especially in Champaign-Urbana, because University of Illinois is right there, smack dab in the community. And when you cross University Street, there's no activity from the university outside of students or professors coming in to do research. And that's been going on for many years, probably a lot longer than I've been born. I would like to be involved, to provide some of my expertise in representing a population that is unemployed, you know, the achievement gap, lack of business ownership, poverty, low income, and incarceration. And I think those are valid. So I'm here today to ask this legislator body to ensure that there's some participation from African American businesses to be able to either sit on this board or work directly with the university to ensure that if there's going to be hubs, then how can we, you know, the local community, if they want to go to school, become entrepreneurs, want to become business owners, they can also do those same things and not feel like they're looking through the window and everybody else is in there, you know, shopping, but they can't go into the store. So I feel that, and so I'm here today to, and I will reach out to my senator and try to find out how can I participate, how can I be involved, who are the other people involved, is there any other African Americans involved, and so those are my comments today.
All right. Mr. Thompson, first, I sincerely apologize for being too quick with the gavel. No disrespect intended.
No problem.
Perhaps when you and I spoke last week, I mentioned that last week the Capital Development Board
Yes.
and the Department of Corrections announced its intention to build a $150 million project in Joliet, and that I believe 20% of, I don't know the right word to use.
The
I don't know-
BP, yes, 20%, the Business Enterprise Act,
Right.
yes.
There's that, and also perhaps I mentioned to you that there's a new Senate Committee on Supplier Diversity, which held a
Correct.
hearing in Chicago several weeks ago.
Yes.
And I see some heads nodding here. Senator Murphy, you were there? No? Senator Bennett? And it's my understanding that universities have a goal of 20%, is that right, Dr. Freeman? Of affecting contracts with vendors of minority, women's, and veterans-owned enterprises.
Right.
And that's law. And so that would seem to provide an opportunity for you and the people about whom you're speaking to participate in the construction projects that have been bruited about today by the University of Illinois officials.
Well, I'm not just talking about construction.
Okay.
And not just about construction, but also about, the educational side of the innovation side of things that, we would, and this is things I've saw over the years. Construction is one aspect of it.
Okay.
But then there's other, avenues and, professional development, things that would be so important, and, I'll just share this with you. When I got in construction, I didn't know construction. I didn't have an idea about construction.
Right.
But as the years go by, I got more experience. So, those things, they work when there's involvement from everybody, and not, coming to say, hey, give us your idea and then we'll implement it. Well, it's my idea, and I like to see that through because, I thought of it, and that's what anybody, we need to be involved in our own success, accountability, and failures. And I think that's fair to say.
Any comments, questions from members of the committee for Mr. Thompson? No. Senator Murphy?
Thank you. And thank you for coming out today, Mr. Thompson. And I think, too, what you're saying is, where is the role for the small business in this whole big plan?
Yeah.
We have all these large global companies that they're eluding, and I think that's another thing we should put on our list, to talk to them and ensure that small business representation,
Yes.
including minority business owners, and that opportunity for everyone to participate, right?
Yeah, yes.
I like that. In the pursuit of Google, Amazon, is there a place for ABC Roofing?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. And by the way, I know you thought I was a lot older, but I am. I just look young.